In 1963, in Turkey's Cappadocia region, an ordinary man was doing renovations in his home. The job he was doing was quite simple. He wanted to widen one of the walls in the basement of his house. He struck the wall with the tool in his hand. One of the stones came loose. Behind it, there was a small cavity. At first, he thought it was an old storage area, but when he looked inside the cavity, he noticed something. This was not just a small hollow. There was a continuing corridor. Curiosity got the better of him. He removed a few more stones. The corridor grew larger. He stepped inside. He advanced a few meters. Then he found a new passage. At the end of this new passage, there was another room. Behind that room, another corridor. At the end of the corridor, another room. And before long, everyone began to notice the same thing. Beneath this house, there weren't just a few hidden rooms. There was an entire city, a massive city hidden underground. Today, we know this city as Derinkuyu. However, the most interesting thing about Derinkuyu is not its existence. What is truly interesting is how such a place was built. Because this was not a small shelter formed by the merging of a few caves. This was a giant underground complex descending approximately 18 floors down. Narrow corridors, living quarters, storehouses, water wells, ventilation systems, animal shelters, meeting areas, and an infrastructure that could sustain thousands of people for months. All of this located dozens of meters beneath the ground. Even today, most people who enter Derinkuyu for the first time have the same reaction. At a certain point, they lose their sense of direction. Because as you descend, the city keeps expanding. Every new corridor opens into another passage. Every new passage leads to another section. And inevitably, one begins to ask the question, who built something this enormous? And more importantly, why? At first glance, the answer seems simple. Historians have been giving the same explanation for many years. The people living in the region took shelter underground to protect themselves from wars. When the enemy came, the doors were closed. People waited underground. When the danger passed, they would emerge to the surface again. It sounds logical, but there is a small problem here. Derinkuyu was not built to hide just a few hundred people. Some researchers believe that between 20,000 and 50,000 people could have lived here at the same time. Just stop for a moment and imagine that. We are not talking about a small underground village, but a small underground city. These people would need to breathe. They would need to drink water. They would need to eat. They would need to feed their animals, and they would have to sustain their lives for months. This would require incredible planning. And this is where the mystery begins. Because as you walk through this underground city, the same question constantly comes to mind. Someone must have designed this in advance. Take the ventilation system, for example. One of the most striking features of Derinkuyu today is its massive air shafts that reach all the way to the surface. Some of them rise dozens of meters upward. This allows fresh air to reach even the lowest levels. But think about it. To build this system, you first need to know exactly how the entire structure would look. Otherwise, a single shaft opened in the wrong place could ruin the whole system. So we are not looking at randomly dug caves. We are looking at a planned engineering project. And this is not limited to the ventilation system. The water system inside the city is equally impressive. Some wells could only be used from the lower levels. They were inaccessible from the upper levels. Why? So that in the event of an attack, the enemy could not poison the water. This detail alone shows a long-term, carefully considered defense plan. But at this point, another question arises. If the only purpose was to hide, why did they go so deep? Why not 2 floors? Why not 3? Why not 5? Why 18 floors? When the enemy reached the door, descending just a few meters would have been enough. But the builders of Derinkuyu apparently weren't satisfied with that. It seems as if they wanted to go as deep as possible. And this leads us to an even more interesting detail. For many years, researchers believed that Derinkuyu was a standalone city. But later research revealed another truth. There wasn't just one city beneath Cappadocia. there was a network. A vast network of interconnected underground settlements. Some tunnels stretched for kilometers. It is believed that some connected to other underground cities. This discovery surprised many people, because now the question had changed. Previously, the question was, why was this city built? Now the question became, how many cities are there? And more importantly, are they all connected to each other? As research progressed, the picture became increasingly complex, because Derinkuyu was not only large, it was also astonishingly well organized. Narrow passages were designed for defense. Some corridors were so narrow that only one person could pass through. Some entrances could be sealed with giant stone doors. These round stones weighed hundreds of kilograms. Opening them from the outside was almost impossible. Even if an attacker managed to get inside, advancing would be extremely difficult. Every corner created a new obstacle. This is why some historians consider Derinkuyu one of the most effective defensive structures in the world. But we keep returning to the same question: who were they so afraid of that they built such a massive defense system? Who anticipated such a threat? And why did they build an entire second world underground? Perhaps even more interesting is this: Derinkuyu is not the only example in the world, because thousands of kilometers away, on other continents, in other cultures, people had also begun descending underground. And some discoveries were just as astonishing as Derinkuyu. Let's leave the corridors of Derinkuyu and travel to the other side of the world, approximately 12,000 kilometers away from Turkey, to the dense rainforests of South America. This is Ecuador. From the outside, this region looks ordinary, but it has divided researchers for many years. According to some, there are only natural caves here. According to others, one of the greatest underground secrets in human history is hidden here. It all started in the 1960s. Hungarian-born Argentine researcher Juan Morich announced that he had made an extraordinary discovery in the forests east of Ecuador. According to his claim, with the help of local guides, he had reached a massive underground system. This was not an ordinary cave. Morich spoke of tunnels stretching for hundreds of kilometers, corridors, halls, and passages disappearing into the darkness. This explanation naturally attracted great interest, but it also created great suspicion, because if what he said was true, this was not just a cave discovery. It could be a discovery that could change history books. Researchers started going to the area. Some thought Morich had exaggerated. Others believed what he described was true. Discussions continued for years. Finally, a few serious expeditions were organized, and researchers really did find extraordinarily large underground voids. Today, the most well-known part of this system is called Cueva de los Tallos, the Cave of the Tallos birds in Turkish. But the inside was far from ordinary. When the first researchers reached some parts of the cave, they were stunned. Some halls reached a height of 50 meters. This is equivalent to a 16-story building, inside a cave, underground, in the middle of darkness. But what was striking was not just its size, it was its shape, because natural caves have certain characteristics: surfaces eroded by water, rounded corners, irregular walls. However, in some sections, researchers encountered a very different image: straight walls, smoother surfaces, and corridors continuing for long distances. This immediately started discussions. Some researchers said these were formed entirely by natural processes. Others thought this explanation was not sufficient, because the human mind is programmed to notice order, and some sections looked too regular. At this very moment, an interesting development occurred. In 1976, a large research team was sent to the area. This was not an ordinary team. Geologists, biologists, engineers, cave experts, a team of about 100 people in total. But there was another name that drew attention: Neil Armstrong. Yes, the first human to set foot on the moon. Many people asked the same question years later. Why did Neil Armstrong go to a cave in the forests of Ecuador? The official explanation was simple: scientific curiosity, supporting the research, participating in discovery work. However, people continued to wonder, because when Armstrong returned, he spoke very briefly about the cave, and one of his statements was discussed for years. He said it was one of the most impressive experiences of his life. Think about it. These words were spoken by a man who had walked on the surface of the moon. That's why many people started asking, what had he really seen there? Of course, one has to be careful here, because most of the stories circulating on the internet have not been verified. Some have been exaggerated over time, some have turned into complete legends. But there is one thing we know for sure. This cave system really exists, and it has still not been fully explored. Even today, researchers have difficulty reaching some sections, because one of the biggest problems of the underground world is distance. Walking a few kilometers on the surface is easy, but covering the same distance underground is completely different. Narrow passages, high humidity, absolute darkness, and the constant risk of losing direction. That's why no one knows the true size of the cave, but there is another striking detail here. The indigenous Shuar people living in the region. They knew about these caves long before modern scientists. In stories passed down through generations, they talked about these places. Passages opening underground, deep corridors, and areas that people hesitated to enter. Of course, oral traditions are not scientific evidence. But what is interesting is this. Similar stories emerge in many parts of the world. People talk about worlds hidden underground. Some describe them as the work of gods. Others associate them with lost civilizations. Whatever the truth is, underground structures continue to fascinate humanity for thousands of years. And these caves in Ecuador are one of the important pieces of this mystery. But there is something else we need to notice here. There are thousands of kilometers between Derinkuyu in Turkey and the caves in Ecuador. Different continents, different cultures, different periods. But still, the same question arises. Why did people constantly go underground? Why did some structures grow toward the depths rather than the surface? And why do similar stories appear in different regions of the world? While searching for answers to these questions, our journey takes us to the next stop. This time to the heart of Europe, to Bosnia. This country in southeastern Europe has long been known for its wars, empires, and complex history. However, a claim made here in 2005 attracted the attention of the whole world. Some researchers suggested that the hills near Visoko were not actually natural formations. The claim was quite unusual. According to them, these hills could be massive structures hidden under the soil. Naturally, a large part of the scientific world opposed this view. Geologists said it was an ordinary geological formation. Archaeologists stated that there was no known civilization in the region that could have built such a structure. The debate grew. Interviews were given, articles were published, people were divided. But amid all these discussions, there was another discovery that was talked about less: the underground tunnels. Today known as the Ravne tunnels, this system has been under research for years. And the interesting thing is this: no one disputes that these tunnels really exist. The debate is about what they are. One of the things that caught the researchers' attention when they first entered inside was the structure of the corridors. Some sections looked quite orderly. The corridors progressed in certain directions. In some areas, they continued for long distances. This created the same thought in many people. Were these really natural formations? Or were they shaped by humans? The problem is this: sometimes nature can also create incredibly regular structures. Therefore, it is not possible to draw a definitive conclusion just by looking at the appearance. However, some details found in Ravne kept the discussions alive for years. Researchers began measuring air quality in some sections. The results were different than expected. It was reported that unusually clean air was found in some underground areas. This drew the interest of many people. Some said it occurred entirely due to natural causes. Others thought it could be a sign of a more complex system. There is still no definitive answer. But the mystery did not end here, because as excavations progressed, new corridors continued to appear, and every new corridor gave birth to new questions. Sometimes this is the most interesting part of history. When you make a discovery, you expect to find answers. But most of the time, what you find is new questions. Ravne is exactly such a place. Even today, researchers cannot say they know the entire system. Some sections are closed, some have not yet been examined, some are still controversial. But what is important for us is something else. So far, we have seen 3 different examples: Derinkuyu, the giant caves in Ecuador, and the tunnels in Bosnia. All 3 are in completely different places, in completely different cultures, but they all have one common point. People went underground, and sometimes they created surprisingly large structures. This situation leads us to a much bigger question. Could the underground world be much more widespread than we think? Perhaps throughout history, humans did not only live on the surface. Perhaps there was a much larger network under the world than we realize today. Of course, there is no proof of this, but the examples we see force one to think. And now the next discovery will make these questions even bigger, because the next stop of our journey is China. The size of the structures found there makes it difficult even to imagine. Imagine a cave. Then enlarge it again, and again. Let the result be giant halls dozens of meters high, and not just one, 24 of them. What's even more interesting, no one knows where the millions of tons of rock that had to be removed during the construction of these halls went. And this is where the story really starts to get strange. Everything we had seen until now was surprising enough. A giant city built underground in Turkey, mysterious passages stretching under the forests of Ecuador, tunnels in Bosnia that are still debated today. But the structure we are about to see stands out from all of them with its scale. Because this time, we are not just facing a tunnel system. We are facing a place where millions of tons of rock have disappeared. And no one can explain exactly how it was done. The year is 1992. An ordinary village in China's Zhejiang region. For generations, the villagers had been telling the same story. Some ponds near the village had no bottom. People didn't know how deep these water pools were. Some had cast nets into them. Some had tried to measure them, but no one could reach the end. Over time, various stories emerged about these ponds. Some people believed they were cursed. Others thought they were just very deep. Finally, one day a villager succumbed to his curiosity. He decided to drain the water. A pump was brought. Work began. Hours passed, then days, and the water level started to drop. People were waiting to see the bottom of the pond. But what emerged was not what anyone had imagined. Because there was a cave under the pond. And not an ordinary cave, a massive void that looked like it had been shaped by human hands. When research began, the astonishment increased even more. Because this was not just one cave. Another was found, then another, then another. In the end, researchers discovered a total of 24 giant underground halls in the area. Each one was enormous in size. The ceiling height of some reached 30 meters. This is equivalent to a 10-story building, but underground. Moreover, these halls did not look like they had formed randomly. The walls were remarkably smooth. The ceilings were supported by consciously left support columns. It was as if someone had planned the entire structure first and then carefully cut the rocks to empty the interior. And this is where the story gets interesting. Researchers made a calculation. They calculated the amount of rock that needed to be removed to create these halls. The result was unbelievable. Approximately 1 million cubic meters of rock. 1 million. It is not easy to visualize this number. With this much material, you could create a small mountain or fill hundreds of Olympic swimming pools. But the problem is this: these rock pieces are nowhere to be found. Under normal circumstances, when such work is done, massive rubble piles remain behind. Even today, when a large tunnel is opened, the material removed can be seen from kilometers away. But here, there is no such thing. Researchers examined the surroundings. They investigated nearby areas. They checked geological records, but they could not find a definitive answer as to where such a large amount of rock had gone. Some think the stones were used in different structures over time. Some suggest they were transported from the region. But even today, there is no full consensus on this. And the mystery does not end here, because the walls of the caves are also striking. In most of the halls, the same pattern is seen. There are parallel lines on the walls, regular marks continuing for hundreds of meters, as if someone had consciously worked the entire surface in the same way. Researchers think this could be for aesthetic purposes. But why? Why would you work the walls of an underground structure so carefully? Moreover, why would you repeat this over and over again in dozens of halls? There is no definitive answer to this question either. And perhaps the most interesting question is this: why were these structures built? Were they warehouses, a mine, a shelter, a temple? None of the theories put forward so far have been able to answer all the questions, because every explanation explains some details while failing to explain others. And so we are left with the same situation again: a massive structure, extraordinary engineering, but no definitive answer. Now, when we look back, we see an interesting picture. Turkey, Ecuador, Bosnia, China. 4 different regions, thousands of kilometers apart. Different cultures, different periods, but similar questions. Why was so much effort put into going underground? Why were some structures built in the depths rather than on the surface? And why can some of them still not be fully explained today? Perhaps all of these have quite ordinary answers. Perhaps future research will eliminate all the mysteries. But there is one thing we know today: the world beneath our feet is much bigger than we think. And there may still be a lot we don't know about human history. Because sometimes the greatest secrets of history are not searched in the sky. They wait silently underground, waiting to be discovered. And perhaps the next great discovery is hidden right under the ground we are walking on right now.
Thank you for watching the Cipher History. Don't forget to like and subscribe so we can keep decoding the secrets of history together. See you in the next mystery.